Welcome to this edition of the Head Podcast. I'm your host, Cam McKinney. This is episode number 65. And in this edition of the podcast, I'm going to tell you how the Astros have won 100+ games in 3 straight seasons. They have not done it the usual way, the way that the Yankees, the Dodgers, and the Red Sox do it, by money and resources. I think the Astros have done it in a similar fashion to the Cubs. First off, they have developed and drafted some of the best position players and pitchers in the game today. Jose Altuve, MVP. George Springer, one of the best center fielders / leadoff men in the game. Carlos Correa, a top 5 shortstop. Alex Bregman, MVP candidate this year. Super utility man Marwin Gonzalez. Dallas Keuchel, and Lance McCullers Jr. to bolster a homegrown pitching staff. All of those players at some point were top 10 in their position. And then add Marwin Gonzalez, who is a super utility guy. Guess who also had super utility guys? The Cubs and the Royals won a World Series with a super utility guy named Ben Zobrist. Good teams have the super utility guy. This year, the Yankees have kind of had the ultimate super utility guy in DJ LeMahieu. The Astros had that guy in Marwin Gonzalez, and that is a big reason for their success these past 3 seasons. The Astros went through those 3 terrible years of losing so that they could get these draft picks, and the way that they've drafted well is one of the huge reasons for their success. Again, Altuve, Springer, Correa, Bregman, Gonzalez, Keuchel, McCullers Jr. McCullers Jr. looked to be like he was going to be one of the best young pitchers in baseball. Now, due to injuries, he's not quite part of that core like he's going to be in the future. I think he's going to be a big part of it. Keuchel was their ace, a Cy Young winner. You draft an MVP, another MVP candidate, a Cy Young winner, and a top 5 shortstop in the same time period. You're having numerous success. And you hit on all those position players, and then you can start to sell some of your other minor leaguers to get the Justin Verlanders and the Zach Greinke's. But more on that in a minute. I just feel like they've drafted excellently. I mean, Springer is in that Mookie Betts realm of, I think that Alex Cora put Mookie Betts in the leadoff spot because he saw the success that the Astros had with George Springer. So Mookie Betts, even though he's a better baseball player than George Springer, I think that they got that idea of Mookie Betts as a super leadoff hitter from the Astros. The Astros are smarter, they're drafting smarter, and they're hitting on all of their draft prospects. Jose Altuve is a top 10 baseball player, Ichiro level of hitter. And to hit on that guy, and he was here for some of the losing, but for now him to be one of the key reasons why you're going to keep winning, that's a huge plus for the Astros. And if he could stay healthy, Carlos Correa would definitely be a top 10 baseball player. He has Alex Rodriguez level of talent. I mean, thus far, these last couple of years, Xander Bogaerts has definitely surpassed him in quality of player. And Francisco Lindor, he's not the best shortstop in baseball, but he is the most talented shortstop in baseball. I think no shortstop has more power than Carlos Correa. Then you have Alex Bregman, who is really Manny Machado-like in the fact that he's a natural shortstop playing a third base position. He is one of the best defensive third basemen in the game who's really a natural shortstop. He's become a clutch hitter, a more power hitter than most people expected, and one of the overall best players in baseball. With Mike Trout out, don't be surprised if Alex Bregman takes home the prize of MVP. I think he should have gotten MVP last year. That's how good he was. I think he's just their best player. He's kind of taken that role from Altuve as the best player on the Astros. Again, you have those guys. You can really have a debate about who their best position player is when you have Altuve, Springer, Correa, and Bregman. But I really think Bregman has taken that spot. No one's more clutch. No one's more cocky. He's an interesting athlete. He's one of the more interesting baseball players in the world. We know he had the back and forth with the Red Sox, and that didn't quite work out for him. But I kind of respect that cocky athlete who's really good. He can talk the talk, but he also walks the walk, and that's something that you don't see very often in sports, and especially baseball nowadays, where it's all nice guys and they all pretend to be friends or whatever. I think baseball needs more of the Alex Bregmans. But just think about those 3 players: Altuve, Springer, Correa, Bregman. You cannot draft better than those players. You cannot develop better players than those players. That is a huge reason why the Astros don't have to fill those needs. There was a time where the Red Sox couldn't fill the shortstop need. Well, guess what? The Astros don't have to worry about that. The Astros don't have to worry about filling a center fielder as long as they have Springer, and third base or shortstop with Bregman. Again, they've lost Marwin Gonzalez, and they've lost Dallas Keuchel, but they still have the main core group. Like, I don't know, a team in the 90s, the Yankees, they kept Jeter, Posada, Pettit, Bernie Williams. Keep those guys together, and success is going to continue to come. Now, this next thing is how I think the Astros have completely copied the Cubs. What the Cubs did is they developed some of the best position players in the game, Chris Bryant, Anthony Russo, they had Kyle Schwarber. Again, they've had a ton of really good positional players, but then they went outside of the organization and paid John Lester, acquired John Lackey, have now had Cole Hamels. To develop pitching takes way too long. And so the Astros have developed all of these positional players, and they've only developed really one great starting pitcher on their own. Sorry, Lance McCullers Jr. Keuchel is the one really good starter that they develop. But then they go outside of the organization and acquire Justin Verlander, Charlie Morton, Garrett Cole, Zach Greinke, Wade Miley, Aaron Sanchez, which hasn't quite worked out yet. But think about that. They acquired some of the best starting pitchers available. I go back to Max Scherzer. Max Scherzer was in the Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks were giving up on Max Scherzer, and the Tigers took advantage of that. And it takes time for a pitcher to develop. Randy Johnson was not great until his 30s. It can take some serious time for starting pitchers to develop and grow. So the Cubs were not hesitant. They acquired John Lester because they knew, even though the only pitcher that the Cubs have developed in this era is Kyle Hendricks. Outside of that, all of their pitchers that have been part of this recent success for the Cubs have been veteran pitchers. Again, John Lackey and John Lester. And again, the Astros have done the same thing. Outside of Keuchel, Charlie Morton is a Pittsburgh guy. Again, Justin Verlander, a Tiger. Garrett Cole was a Pirate. Zach Greinke was a Diamondback. Wade Miley was a Red Sox and Oriole and a Mariner. Aaron Sanchez is a Blue Jay. They have not developed their own starting pitching because that will really take a rebuild forever to develop those kind of starting pitchers. That trade in particular of Verlander has really shifted the gears. It's like when the Brewers acquired CC Sabathia and Zach Greinke. It shifted the powers to be. That's when the Astros really became the Houston Astros, when they went outside the organization and said to themselves, we have a really good offensive team. We do not have a great pitching staff. Let's get ourselves Justin Verlander, and now we can have a real argument that we are a great pitching staff. And Justin Verlander has turned this team into the great pitching staff that it is. Then take Charlie Morton, who leads the American League in ERA this season. He was a nobody in Pittsburgh. No, they didn't draft Charlie Morton, but they did acquire him and make him better. I think the Astros have learned that they can take veteran pitchers who haven't had success and turn them into really good players. Garrett Cole was really good on the Pittsburgh Pirates, but those last few years with the Pirates were miserable. He was not developing off-speed pitches. He was only throwing fastballs. Then he goes to the Astros, and he's had 2 straight seasons of 300 strikeouts. The Astros know how to make pitchers better. The issue is to develop young pitching to be as good as Justin Verlander or to be as good as Garrett Cole would take forever. Think about this with the Red Sox. The Red Sox have won 3 World Series in how many years now? They've won a lot. They've won 4 World Series now, right? Guess what? They didn't develop their own starters. To win in 2004, they had to acquire Curt Schilling. They had to acquire Pedro Martinez. In 2007, they needed Josh Beckett. They needed outside pitching help. 2013, they needed John Lester. John Lester and Clay Buchholz are the 2 pitchers of this era that the Red Sox have actually developed. It is impossibly hard to develop pitching staffs that are homegrown talent. That's why that Angels team from a few years back was really rare, where they had Jared Weaver, they had John Lackey, they had so many pitchers that they had developed. That does not exist in baseball today. The Nationals team that's having some success has Patrick Corbin and Max Scherzer. The only homegrown pitcher on that staff that is great is Steven Strasburg. You need to get outside pitching help, or these rebuilds are going to take forever to happen. The Royals needed to acquire Johnny Cueto to win the World Series because they didn't develop their own starting pitchers well enough. To develop starting pitching, you can be waiting forever to develop that. The Yankees in 2008 won with CC Sabathia and AJ Burnett outside the organization to buy pitching. You can develop offensive players really quickly. Mike Trout did not spend a lot of the time in the minors. Randy Johnson takes a lot more time to develop. It's worth the wait, don't get me wrong, but it can take forever to develop those kind of players, and to have fast rebuilds in baseball, you have to acquire those pitchers and acquire them fast. And with the Astros might losing Cole at the end of the season, they acquired Zach Greinke for reinsurance, because they know when they lose Garrett Cole, they don't have anything close in their minor league system that is going to be close to as good as Garrett Cole is, because these last few years they've acquired some of the best starting pitchers in the game. They can get a guy like Aaron Sanchez. Aaron Sanchez could be the next Charlie Morton, a guy who in Toronto had some success but isn't yet great. They can develop those guys faster to develop their own starting pitch. Some of their draft picks, their number one picks, are still in the minor leagues because it can take forever, and some of them are not in the organization. There's a reason they've hit on the position players. It's also just easier to hit on a George Springer, to hit on a Correa, to hit on a Bregman, to hit on a Marwin Gonzalez, to hit on a Keuchel and a McCullers Jr. You are only going to get about 2 of those a decade, to be honest. It is impossible in this era to develop 5-man pitching rotation that is great. I think you have to go outside the organization and acquire talent that some people have given up on or are just trading away because the Tigers aren't very good. So take advantage of the fact that Justin Verlander is on the market. I also believe in this era, the opposite has been proven the wrong thing to do, to buy offense. The Red Sox bought Adrian Gonzalez. The Red Sox bought Carl Crawford. The Red Sox bought a bunch of guys who didn't quite work out with their system. Adrian Beltre is the one offensive player that they bought, and it was a success that one season. Again, a lot of their acquisitions did not quite work out. The Phillies have bought Bryce Harper. That's not going to lead to wins. They could develop the position players fast enough. They should have bought pitching. The Padres are the most frustrating team in baseball because they have one of the best pitchers park ever in Petco, and yet this offseason they bought Manny Machado. Last offseason they bought Eric Hosmer. Those are great positional players, but they should really be buying pitchers because they had their best success this generation when they had a star pitcher like Jake Peavy. Buy veteran pitching. They kind of tried to do that with James Shields, but that wasn't quite good enough. And then the other team that frustrates me the most in this era is the Angels. When they bought Albert Pujols and Josh Hamilton, they went over the top with offense. Again, they had Mike Trout, they had Albert Pujols, they had Josh Hamilton. It meant nothing because they didn't have enough starting pitching. This offseason, the Angels should definitely be in the market for Garrett Cole. I'm just bringing up these teams because this is why the Astros have been good. They did it the opposite way. They developed some of the best positional players in the game, and they bought starting pitching. There's a reason that the teams that have had recent success have gone through this model. Because to trust your minor league system to develop the next John Lackey or to develop the next Sean Lester or to develop the next Justin Verlander, I don't trust that. I trust that you can develop position players that will have great success. I do not trust teams when it comes to developing pitchers. Because again, the Diamondbacks gave up on Max Scherzer because it was taking too long. They didn't quite wait long enough for the payoff. Again, it's one of the biggest blunders in the history of their organization, but were they justified? Were they, you know what I mean? Like, they had to wait too long for Max Scherzer to have success. The same thing with the Diamondbacks with Trevor Bauer. Trevor Bauer was on the Diamondbacks. They gave up on him and they traded him to Cleveland, where he became a really good pitcher. It takes too long for these guys to develop into the star pitchers that they end up becoming. As rare as it is for the Angels to develop a guy like Mike Trout, maybe the best player in their organizational history, it's even more rare for them to develop a star pitcher, and that's why what they are doing is just ridiculous, and what the Astros is doing is brilliant. Developing the position players, buying that these guys will develop into hitters because they just develop fast enough. The pitchers do not. The Justin Verlanders who have success early on are few and far between. The Zach Greinke developed into this. Went to the Royals, there were ups, there were downs. He wasn't always brilliant. But then he went to the Dodgers, and then he went to the Diamondbacks. He's developed into this. It takes too long to wait for star pitchers to develop, and too many teams give up on those guys. And again, spending monies on the Harpers, the Machados, the Hosmers, the offense, it's a ridiculous thing. The Adrian Gonzalez with the Red Sox, the Carl Carl Crawfords. You can develop those guys. Those guys are special, but they're not that unique. What is unique is the Justin Verlanders of the world, Zach Greinke's of the world, Charlie Morton's of the world. Those guys are unique because they have something special. They're rare. They are rare. Great starting pitching in today's era is rare, and that's why the Astros have gone outside of the organization, because as well as they draft, it is hard, and they've only hit on really 2 starting pitchers this era in McCullers and Keuchel, and Keuchel is a lot better than McCullers, obviously. You want a Cy Young, and they didn't want to pay Dallas Keuchel at the end of that run, but he's the one great starting pitcher they developed in this era. If you are going to do a fast rebuild, you are going to go through 3 or 4 years of being bad, then draft a bunch of position players, hope they turn out to be successful, and then buy starting pitching. That is the formula that works. That is the reason the Cubs have had this success. Where would the Cubs be if they didn't have Chris Bryant, Kyle Schwarber, and then have gotten John Lester? John Lester is the candle on the cake. He is the final touch of that team. They needed that veteran pitcher. That is how you should do this success. And again, the Astros have done that. They developed all these guys, and then they added Justin Verlander. That is the final topping on the cake. That is what's making them win 100 games in the last 3 seasons. And then getting Garrett Cole, go outside of the organization for pitching and develop position players. That is the ultimate way to be a great team right now in base. Truth of the matter is, it's not flashy to do this strategy unless you're getting a Justin Verlander. But for the Padres and the Phillies in particular to say, we're not going to sign Bryce Harper and Manny Machado to get a lot of publicity. We're going to sign 3 or 4 starting pitchers. The Phillies in particular have one of the best pitchers in the game in Aaron Nola. And then the other 4 guys they have in their rotation are just putrid. And the Padres do not have a very well-known pitching staff that I find interesting. They just don't. But if I were them, I would say, let's not sign Bryce Harper. Let's not sign Manny Machado. Let's sign 3 or 4 veteran pitchers around Aaron Nola in particular in Philly, and they would be a really good team. They could be the Astros. Instead, they made the splashy signing. They spent their stupid money, and they got Bryce Harper, and they brought in Gene Segura. You can develop the next Gene Segura. You can kind of hope Rhys Hoskins develops into the next Bryce Harper. I think the smarter thing to do is to go for quantity over quality. Quality over quantity. I think you should go for more instead of one guy. The Phillies put their entire hopes in the hands of Bryce Harper, and it hasn't worked out for them this season. He's been really good, but the issue is their pitching and their relievers have not been. And the reason that is because they put all of their money in him. And this is all to say that the Astros did the smart move. The Astros have ended up paying their guys, Jose Altuve. They've ended up paying George Springer. They'll end up paying Justin Verlander. But there are those guys that have had success because they built around a team. And a team has great position players and pitchers. And the pitchers are able to be there because they developed the position players before, and then they've gone outside the organization and have brought in some of the best acquisitions ever. Again, Verlander, really good. Charlie Morton, really good. Garrett Cole, really good. Zach Greinke, really good. How about the Yankees bringing in J.A. Happ last year? It worked really well. Develop your position players and bring in veteran pitchers to have success around them, because really good pitching is hard to find. But to put all that free agent money into the Manny Machados and the Bryce Harpers, to me, is ridiculous. And the number one reason the Astros have won 100+ games in 3 straight years is because they have not spent their money dumb. They have spent it wisely, and they have acquired the right starting pitchers to go with their nucleus of core positional players who all of their batters have the potential to be really good players. Bregman, MVP candidates. Jose Altuve, an MVP. George Springer, one of the best center fielders in baseball. They are a team. They are not one guy. Justin Verlander, Zach Greinke, Garrett Cole. The only issue the Astros have really had is their bullpen, and they've been able to overcome some of that issue. They are the best team of this era, and I would not be surprised if they win their second World Series in 3 years, because they are that good. And they are that good because of this strategy. There's a reason the Cubs did this strategy. This is the strategy to do. So finally, if baseball teams listen to this advice, draft position players, make sure you draft well, and then acquire starting pitchers outside of the organization. Acquire the John Lesters, acquire the Verlanders, acquire the Charlie Mortons, acquire the Zach Greinke's, and you will have success. Rebuilds will be a lot faster because if you draft pitchers, you will be waiting way too long for the rebuild to be successful. But if you draft position players and you hit on a couple of them, then you buy the pitching. That is the key to the Astros' success, and that's why they might be World Series champs yet again. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Head Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Cam McKinney. There will be a new episode of the Head Dad Podcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts and iTunes. Please rate, review, and subscribe. Thanks again for listening.